In today's video, we're going to have a look at Mexico, just see what you get within Trove to unlock the enormous potential of this country. So here are two maps taken from Trove, just illustrating the basins of Mexico. There are different names, different areas, there are different basins, but in essence, there's some similarities. We show that there are basins from essentially the western part of Mexico, all the way down through the interior, down to the Gulf of Mexico, and indeed out into the deep water Gulf of Mexico and over to Yucatan. This is some very old data, this showing production, world production from 1900 out to 1935. Mexico was indeed the world's second largest producer. This graph doesn't include the USA, but Mexico back in the 1920s, the second largest producing nation on the planet. There's a lot of history here. Pause the video if you want to read this, what happened back in 1938, and basically the country kind of got fed up with foreign oil companies coming in and making an awful lot of money and very little of it actually staying in Mexico. So in 1937, well, there was a strike by Mexican workers, and it was actually in 1938 that the expropriation decree was declared, and this basically sent most foreign oil companies packing, and later created Petróleos Mexicanos, or Pemex as it's known. It's a state-owned company, and it held pretty much a monopoly over the Mexican oil industry for many decades. If we look at the status today, and then this is an article from Wood Mackenzie dated May 2024 from the Offshore magazine. Their view is Mexico facing multiple challenges in the energy sector, including declining oil production, gas production, need for increased exploration, and so on. There's a lot of problems, and we'll look at those when we look at various production and reserves graphs. We talked about Pemex. Here's an extract just looking at the exploration products and the exploitation products that Pemex is involved in across Mexico. It's a huge number there. You can see 199 exploration projects, 184 exploitation projects. Is that too much for one company? I've only ever seen something like this, for other NOCs, and I don't think it really is the most efficient way of exploring. And I think what you get into is groupthink. You need fresh ideas coming in, new approaches. That's what unlocks values, some out-of-the-box thinking, perhaps. So here we go. We have a look here at recent exploration, and it's a good story, I suppose, if you look at this. From 2020 out to 2023, there's been an incline from around about 1.65 million barrels in 2020 up to 1.9. In part, Mexico produces these 5-year plans. So they identify areas for exploration and for exploitation, and they keep this rolling. Now, the idea of this is to sustain growth, but even with these sorts of efforts, you can see in very recent times, from mid-2023, it looks like there is a bit of a decline there. But you can imagine a politician standing up and saying how things are rosy and how things are going really, really well, and we're on a growth curve. Let's have a look at that in the context of what's been happening since 1994 up to 2024. Mexico used to produce over 3 million barrels of oil per day, and that number dropped down to this low in about 2019, 2020, and it's really only in the last few years there has been a recovery, but it's not a major one. It's halted the decline for sure, perhaps some signs of growth, but a shadow of its former self. So here's more of a long-term view, and you can see we're missing the 1920s production here, but from 1965 to around about 1975, stable oil production around about 500,000 barrels of oil per day, then ramping up through the late 70s up to the early 80s, and then a plateau right through to a peak in around about 2004. From 2004 onwards, as we've seen, major declines. Here the numbers are quoted around about 3.8, going down to under 2 million barrels of oil per day. Some recent recovery, but not a huge amount. This is the reserves, and what you can see, if you ignore these anomalies for a second, you can see that back in 1980 there was sort of 30 billion barrels of oil reserves, and by 2020 that number, well, it's about 7 or 8, probably nearer 7 or 6. So huge decline in oil reserves. Now, these couple of oops moments, we haven't investigated what they are, but what you can see is somebody felt very, very bullish back here in around about 1996 and gone ahead and added 10 billion barrels of reserves. They kept that going for a year or two, but then a readjustment and the reserves came back down. Essentially, whatever that was, it went away. And this is the sort of thing you get when you get politicians involved trying to bump up the numbers. Looks like something similar happened here back in the early 80s. And then we see this major decline here, around about sort of 7 or 8 billion barrels dropped, lost back in 2002, 2003, some kind of a write-down, a steady decline thereafter. If we look at gas reserves, well, I mean, from 1980, some sort of decline here, but come 1997, and a major readjustment. I think it was realized that these reserves, this here now in trillions of cubic meters, and this is going from 2 down to about 0.8 trillion cubic meters, and then another readjustment here in the early 2000s, and again, gas reserves just going down, a shadow of their former selves. Gas production, on the other hand, well, it's generally ramped up from the 70s right up to a peak here around about 2013, but there has been a steady decline in gas production, which is similar to what's happened with oil. Perhaps a minor recovery in the last few years, but well down on what it was 10 years ago. However, if we look at consumption of energy, and this is Mexico's gas consumption, we haven't got the oil consumption data to hand, but gas consumption, well, you can see just going up and up and up and up. Obviously, there is insufficient production to satisfy this demand. So here again is another extract from TROVE, and this looking at the resource size and profitability. You can see profitability, or IR, on the y-axis and resource size in millions of barrels equivalent on the x-axis. Red is exploitation projects and blue exploration projects. You can see this is the sort of thing that is being used to assess, well, what are the best opportunities and which ones are high graded. You can see there's a lot of certainly large and quite attractive and interesting looking projects. Here's an example of one of the basins. This is the Tampico-Misantla basin, and what I particularly love about this is these are all the oil fields here, the sort of coastal oil fields, and they go round in this trend, a very obvious trend, an inner ring and then an outer ring, in fact possibly several outer rings that you've got in here. And in time, of course, it was discovered that this ring actually extended offshore. Now, there are lots of gaps offshore compared with what there are onshore. I wonder how much potential there is in this region. The geology is fascinating, and we'll have a look at the Tampico-Misantla basin when we look at our trove entry in the region. Another area which is really interesting is the Sureste basin. This now down in the southern Gulf of Mexico, or is it going to be called the southern Gulf of America? That's a new one in 2025. This is the Sureste Basin. Now, in 1972, it was actually the Mesozoic carbonates were discovered underneath the tertiary, essentially clastic reservoirs. The tertiary, which are these yellow blobs here, both in the western area, and also the tertiary gas here up towards Yucatan, right on the eastern side of the region. Whereas it's this band here actually shows where the Mesozoic oil is. And we have all of these fields captured, categorized within our TROVE database for the region. Now let's take a look at Zama as a case study. So here's an overview of Zama. This is the entry that you get when you subscribe to TROVE, and this is just for the Zama field, and you can see very, very extensive, lots and lots of information. We're going to have a quick look around on this and just find out a little bit of information, a bit more detail on Zama itself. So if I zoom into this area here, Well, we can see where it's located. It's in the, well, it says the Salinas Basin, but I think Surest Basin is what most people call it. It was in Block 7, is this western block, and then here's the eastern block here. A bit more detail you can see. Here's Block 7, here's the Zama 1 discovery. Lovely seismic line here showing the well cutting across this fault, and of course having to set some contingency casing just above the fault before they went through it, and they've encountered the fault here. It doesn't look like there's any particular issue. Set a 13 3/8 casing shoe here, and then they've targeted these essentially these seismic anomalies here, these bright bands, and of course showing here some kind of a flat spot. So this is a conformance to of the seismic anomaly to structure, and you can see it really on some of these and some of the maps that we're going to have a look at now. Other things I see on here, of course, I mean, there's some brights going down here, and could that possibly be a very, very long hydrocarbon column down here? And likewise, another one. Now, I think the well did actually go down right through this sequence, so we do know what Zama Deep has. But look at these here. Are these potentially the sourcing areas bringing hydrocarbons up into the Zama feature? I don't know, but certainly looks very, very interesting. As we look around here, we can see the location, the block boundary here. This is the Pemex area, so it's the Pemex area is to the east, the Talos area, and this is where Harbour Energy are now involved with this. There's Zama 1 here, Zama 2, and a sidetrack, and Zama 3. I guess trying to find out exactly what's going on the block boundary, but for unitization, equity purposes, it's actually, it merits understanding a sort of the east-west as well, putting some appraisal wells in here. Now, this was an ASAB 1 undrilled at the time of this map's creation. So we have this is two different entries. This is from Eddie Young, but we've had a look at the map. You can see what else is in the area here. It's the largest deep water, so I beg your pardon, largest shallow water oil discovery in the past 20 years. And Woodmac named it the global discovery of the year back in 2017. So Talos led, they were the operator of the well. Other activity in the region here. This is from Wintershall. We can see a description here of the Zama oil field development, you know, all the project, how it was discovered, when it was discovered, 2017, how it was appraised, and then went on to essentially towards field development, FID, and all those things. Nice structure map here. And each time, what you're seeing is you're actually seeing the reference to where this comes from. So it's coming from the Talos Energy annual report from 2021. So all of this stuff is available publicly, but to have it all together in one place is very, very powerful. I did see something I was going to go back to. You know, I remember when Subsurface Manager, you know, you'd be looking for information on analogs, and really what you wanted was to understand where it comes from. And in this case here from CNC reservoirs, and you can see the reservoir depths around about 11,000 feet in 546 foot of water, which anything less than 1,000 feet, we called shallow within Trove. Miocene sandstones over 1,000 feet and about 54% net to gross. I think I've seen numbers which say up to about 2 billion barrels of oil in place. In fact, I think I've seen numbers of for reserves mentioned as high as that. 28 to 30 API gravity oil, and anticipated well at this time in the region of 35-40%, possibly even more, early days. Some analysis here and benchmarking within the DAX process. Here's the exploration here. It's showing Offshore Engineer, another a good little article here, talking about what's been going on, showing a section here. This is coming from calmenergy.com, and showing this is obviously highlighting this Sarsken 1 well, but you can see the salt diaparism in the region, setting up a lot of these things. It's possibly those anomalies off to the east of of Zama actually are to do with salt, so maybe that's not a hydrocarbon effect. But this is the sort of information you can glean and learn by just looking around. And I like, there was an article over to the right here. Could the likes of Zama and Trion actually change the mindset? Well, it talks about how this was the 2013 energy reform, which allowed private operators to participate in the Mexican oil and gas market. And so lots of companies came in. There were 111 contracts signed in round 2.4, and it's brought in a huge amount of investment, of which a large chunk of that's already been invested. We've now got 15 discoveries and maybe 2 billion barrels of oil has been found. Pemex, they've got about a 95% share of production, and they're incredibly busy, with lots and lots of projects, as we've seen earlier. But they've also got significant challenges with heavy debt maturities in the next few years. And this is an article, August 2023, by Fernando Cruz, and talking about lots of 107 billion barrels worth of debt, which they have to manage. So the question is there sufficient revenues? Is there enough expertise, technology, and everything else within a company that's very, very busy doing an awful lot of things? So this project was, of course, held up with unitization, and ultimately it was Pemex was awarded the operatorship. Now Talos Energy, I've got lots of experience in the Gulf of Mexico, so they could have actually had a go at taking over. You can see some of these articles. We keep it up to date. We keep adding to it, and generally speaking, the more recent articles tend to be over to the right-hand side. As we find things, we put them in. So as it fills up, generally the more recent articles are here, but we might find an old article, and of course we're not going to reshuffle everything in here, so it might be that it gets added. But that gives you an idea of the sorts of information. And I like this here. This is an estimate here, and it's coming from Offshore Technology, looking at the ownership structure. And likewise, here's an estimate. Of course, in the public version, they don't actually put the values of the production on here. You have to pay for that, but you can see sort of talking about sort of startup in maybe 2025, 2026, and then a very, very long tail, and probably the field will go into 2050. So that's global data. Lots and lots of sources, a nice little schematic there showing what the field looks like. Lots and lots of information, and I'm just going to zoom out again and leave you. That's what you get that just on the Zama field within the TROVE database. That's TROVE Mexico offshore. Moving on, we'll look at Trion as a case study. Here's the TROVE entry for Trion, and we'll have a look around here and learn a little bit about the field. Every field and discovery in Mexico, in the offshore, all in this particular TROVE, an equivalent for the onshore, and another database for the entirety of the offshore US Gulf of Mexico region. If we have a look here, let's start with this seismic line up here. It's a seismic line here running west to east. Here's Trion. You can see that it's gone through this section, down through the tertiary. I think by the looks of it, just TDing above the Cretaceous in this the Paleocene, the Whopper. Okay, not sure about that. Anyway, here's a map, and I think looking at this, it looks like sort of an extended anticline, a faulted anticline, albeit, but looks like some serious tectonism going on here. Looks like a series of faults and antithetics, and lots of faults over here as well. Very, very busy area. It looks like there's some kind of compression going on here. It might be sort of almost like a toe thrust in places. Another section here showing the relationship of the Trion here with its 25, 29 API oil. in this Eocene inferior. The Wilcox is the equivalent here, and here's some other Wilcox discoveries here at Trident and Great White. So we can see how these things compare with other adjacent discoveries in the region. I did notice announcements from Woodside here. So for everything you can see, we've got all the original hyperlinks back to the publicly available data. So it's all public data within Trove, and you can see here, here's a regional section, a Trion over here in the west, and as we head towards the east, and then up the ways northwest to southeast, you can see this salt diapir here. You can see this salt wing, and there's obviously a play underneath this salt wing here. But at Trion, you can see there's been salt withdrawal, accommodation space. It's been filled with all these sediments. They've been largely deformed. It looks like there's some late fill in here, or a lot going on in this region here. And as you go over towards Maximino and Supremus, you can see that there are similarities, but also significant differences going on. This over more of a sort of a salt pillow rather than associated next to a diaper, as with these two features. So this is showing the context of where it is relative to all these well-known fields here, and this is the Wilcox. It's the sort of Perdido trend. We can see lots of articles in here talking about what the project is going to be about, the timing, the execution of the prospect, something on the stratigraphy down here, some information about various offset wells. You can see in terms of the composition here, Trion, it's Wilcox, 80, nearly 90% methane, 6% ethane, all this information, including all the carbon isotope data. So lots of geochemical coming from another source, which is Science Direct publication. Here's some great illustrations of how it's going. This is from the Wang paper. This one from Westwood Energy, and showing you exactly where the things, we've kind of seen that before, but a bit more information on there. The application of CSEM. Now this is electromagnetic data, and by the looks of things, this company EMGS showing that there was a resistivity anomaly associated with this. So this isn't seismic. This is using electromagnetic surveying techniques, and you can see again we've put in this article again because it's not just about Zama, it's also about Trion. So if you want to find it, you'll find all that information here in Trion as well as at Zama. And there's the Wilcox there. It's sort of Paleocene age. It's a coastal plain turbidite. So lots and lots of information. I'll just zoom back out again. This is what you get within Trove. Now you can see, as I zoom up the page here, you can see that we've got lots and lots of data points in here, and I can go into any one of these here. So Perdido Fold Belt, telling you this in this case just about a block here, what's going on within this block. So you can search these things very, very quickly and easily. You can then look at the basins. You can find out, right, I want to find out about all of these basins. We were looking earlier, weren't we, at this basin down here, the Tampico-Misantla. Apply the filter to that. So you can see here that we've got a whole bunch of fields in this region. So if we want to find out about the bigger fields, this is the Atun field. It shows where it is here. It's one of the offshore fields. The Labina, again, that's in the offshore region. Lots of articles wherever we find them, and we add to them all the time. So the Trove just grows and grows. That's why we have it as a subscription service. Now some of these we won't have an awful lot of information here. Lamprey doesn't have as much information as others perhaps, but we can certainly see where it is, and just what it's all about. So it's not a bad entry. I chose that one because its score was written down here as only being a 2, whereas there's actually there's enough information there that would probably warrant it being a 3. It would get a score of 4 if we had we'd entered lots of information in these columns here. So you can see, here's the age information, here's the lithology information, and obviously in the basin, the majority of these fields are karstified limestone or carbonate plays. Very little information published on a lot of them, but we certainly got oil gravities. Very few times would we get any information or much information in publications on the gas composition. There are exceptions, for example, in the southern North Sea, these columns are absolutely packed full of data, aquifer information, reservoir temperature, pressure. We've got size information. We've also got discovery year, startup date. Not everything, like blocks, where we're reviewing blocks, they don't have a discovery year because they're effectively just a block. You can see the number of years on production for some of these things, discovery wells, the operator, so on and so forth. And of course, lats and longs, very, very important that we have lats and longs, because then you can actually put them into your GIS system. This is effectively a flat file. This is a formal Excel table. So it's the easiest thing in the world to actually put that across into GIS and link it up with all your other mapping packages. So a lot of our subscribers actually do that. So lots of information in here, lots of gaps as well. We're filling those in as we go along, but this is just for that one basin. There's other information in here. So say, you wanted to just understand about the stratigraphy. Well, here, fill your boots. Here's various schemes on the stratigraphy of offshore Mexico. You want to learn about the infrastructure? Well, you can see all the pipelines, refineries in the region, LNG terminals. So lots and lots of information on the available infrastructure in the region. So that's also gimme. Every trove has this. You want to find out about the structural geology in here, and you can see examples. You can read about the evolution. Sometimes we have a separate section where we just look at the sort of plate tectonic evolution. We tend to put that down in something we call regional. So this is more big picture plate tectonic level, whereas structural would probably be showing more of the structures associated with some of the accumulations that have been found in the region. So huge amounts of information in here on the region structural geology. Seismic, well, examples of seismic showing where material is available, not just from one operator pushing their own data set, but coverage from anyone and everywhere. So this is a great place to start. You'll find stuff that may be difficult to actually find, particularly if you're new to the area. When we want to look at things like source rocks, the timing of generation and migration, we will have all sorts of things in here. Of course, these are very, very important here, showing you, this is the petroleum system in the Perdido area, the Mexican ridges, or in the deep water Salina Basin. So lots and lots of geochemistry. And again, as we find stuff and people ask us to look, we'll add to that. So we've looked at stratigraphy, license information. Well, I mean, this is basically looking at some of the rounds, what was awarded at various times, various stages. So great place to just kind of look at the history of the region. Here's reference to a Woodmac report, which is looking at the Mexico deep water 5 years after the last licensing round. Now, the issue here is, you have to pay $1,350 to access that, but if it's of interest, probably worth every dollar. But there's an awful lot that you get within Trove, and effectively, this is all available. And you can see the speed I'm moving around this thing. The dashboard is great to be able to have a look at. So say you're only interested in Cretaceous fields and say only in the Suez Basin, and you only want to look at ones that are oil and gas, then you can see we're only interested in discoveries and fields. In fact, let's just make that fields. But yeah, these are the fields that satisfy all those criteria, and there's lots more fields that are covered, but they don't match these criteria I put in. We've got maps, and this is kind of it's not exactly a dumping ground, but I always think for a geologist, a geoscientist, just to have a look in here, just to get inspired by looking at all these different maps, whether it be a bathymetry map, a structural elements map, or just a geography. Here's from the Millennium Energy Atlas, and this is from Petroleum Economist. So great look. And of course, not all of these maps are going to be up to date, but they're kind of they show, well, oh, this is a snapshot at the time, showing what's going on here. So this map here showing the extent of the salt basins, for example, and then there's the Zhuklub crater, the meteorite crater at the end Cretaceous, which caused global devastation. So that's the location of it there. I think I've kind of shown you quite a lot of the different things, and this is all available. It's updated all the time. So if you subscribe to this, you get all of these fields and any developments that we see and we find in the industry press. We'll just keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. And we send out an update to you on a regular basis. Now, what have we learned about Mexico? Well, it was formerly the second largest producer in the 1920s, largest producer outside of the United States, that is. But in terms of oil production and reserves, they're in major decline. Gas production and reserves also declining, yet gas consumption is increasing significantly. Something's clearly not working. Perhaps the role of Pemex is not really delivering what the Mexican economy really needs. So if you do want to understand Mexico's potential, you'll need 3 databases to cover the area: the offshore Mexico, onshore Mexico, and the US Gulf of Mexico. And there's a tiny little plot here. Now, there are so many dots, they're completely overprinting one another, but you can see here's the US Gulf of Mexico, Mexico itself, all the way down here into the Sureste, the Campeche Basin, and the Yucatan region. You can see also we have other databases for California, for other parts of Texas, for the eastern seaboard, and indeed the Caribbean. If we just look at the 3 databases listed there, here's the number of assets that we have in the region, and you can see it's the best part of 2,000 assets. Of those, these are the fields and the discoveries, and then just other entries, and over 30,000 data points in those databases. So, if you want to find out more about Mexico, subscribe to Trove. Subscribe to the channel if you want to keep seeing videos about this region. And there's my email address. So drop me an email and let me know what you think, and if you want to see a demonstration of this region or indeed anywhere else in the world. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back in this channel before too long.